And, you know, whenever you come at someone like this, the only place they have to go is back. You know, they can't really partner together. So I work with sometimes residential staff, and one will say, like, this young man will not get out of bed, and I don't understand why, and he's so resistant. And I'll say, have you ever asked him? No. Why? You know, and it's a real conversation around, like, you've never asked him? So I said, well, why don't you sit down? So we'll talk about that. And then one of the staff went and sat down and said, you know what? What's going on? You know, why aren't you getting him out of bed? And it was around his medications. Well, the medications were making him so groggy, and it was a change in medication. He really didn't like not getting out of bed, but they had a whole conversation. Then they were able to talk to the doctor and figure out, well, what are next steps? How can, you know, what do you want out of life? And if you want a job, and you want, this particular young man wanted a girlfriend, and he wanted to be able to spend money on video games, and he couldn't do any of the things he wanted with this problem of not getting out of bed. He couldn't move forward. So they started to engage him, and it was like a different young man. When they asked him, well, what's going on with you? He wasn't just being, you know, lazy. He wasn't not being motivated. He was really looking for someone to help him, but he didn't have the tools or the ingenuity to express what was going on.
Now that's exciting. That's exciting, because there you have a situation where, I mean, think of the change that's been made in this person's life.
Yes.
Because of that one shift of approach. And MI is not a model that you have to have a master's degree to use.
Right.
I mean, a few days of training and you have the basics enough to be able to begin to use that, especially in a residential or line staff setting or in community work. It's really a very broad approach.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful approach, and it's not, the logic behind it is you know, kind of, I would say almost historical knowledge. If you think about like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People,
right.
You know, you never want to criticize anyone. No one likes to be criticized. Build from their strengths, ask them what they want, how do they move forward, and how do you partner with them, and you gain friends and influence people.
Very much so. And even just the valuing that someone experiences when you sit down and have a real conversation with them. And for a lot of folks that the department works with, and certainly that you've worked with too, that doesn't always happen for them. There's a lot of directive conversation, but there's not a lot of tell me what's going on with you. There's not a lot of really engaging with someone.
Right.
And this model does that.
Right, and there's not a lot of ownership. I met with a group of residential staff, and we were doing a training, and I said, well, I think it'd be great if you had the clients write down their own goals. And they were like, you know, you would have thought I suggested, you know, something absurd. They're going to write their own goals. And I said, well, they own them more. When you write anything, you feel engaged. You engage, you know, all the 5 senses. You know, you're even smelling the pen, you know, and you're much more likely to do it. It's 70% more likely to happen when someone writes it down in their own handwriting and engages in it. And it was really like, you know, a lot of resistance I met with, and so I had to take a step back and say, well, what might work with your clients? Well, would you have them say it out loud, and you would write it, and how would you engage them more so they feel more a part of it? So I think that's an important piece of it.
What does client-driven mean, after all?
Yes,
if not, you know, letting folks determine what it is that's important to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, this is interesting. How did you get into motivational interviewing?
It's funny. I was kind of dragged into it. I was sent.
Did someone say you had to do it? Is that why you?
I was a transitional age case manager and transitional age supervisor at my office, and so as such, and since the department's initiative came out of that movement, they sent me to this training back in November of 2007, and went in there with a chip on my shoulder because I've got a master's degree in clinical psych. I know what I'm doing. I'm a therapist by training, and so I'm not really going to learn anything here. I'm thinking I'm just going to kill time for a couple of days, get the CEUs, and I start to listen to what the fellow had to say and think a bit about it. And I was initially kind of critical and offered some challenges to him, but he was very good and took my challenges in light and was very reflective with me. One of his approaches is to use MI while he's doing the training.
Excellent.
And as I began to practice with the model, which was part of the training, I began to realize this actually has something to it. This is really kind of the model that I've dreamed about, where you really are engaging with someone in ways that we aren't always encouraged to do in this field, in ways that that we haven't had opportunity to do because the model really hasn't, the field's model really hasn't allowed that, hasn't encouraged that. And I started to practice with it more and became more skilled with that, went to more trainings, and here we are.
Here we are. But it is interesting because you think about, it seems intuitive, but yet it's not to so many people. They want to get involved and tell people what to do, and then people dig in their heels, and you don't move forward.
It runs counter to the way we've done business for a very long time, and it runs counter to our egos.
Yes, that's true.
That's a big piece of it, is that we want to be the experts. We want to have the answers. And because goodness knows we went to school, so we
Right.
should have the answers. That's what the school is for. But this is about not being that person with the answers. It's
Yes.
about really just having a human conversation, a compassionate, respectful conversation, and helping a person work through what they think they should do with a problem.
Absolutely. And active listening really sounds like a big piece of it. And when people really feel that someone can demonstrate understanding of what they want and what they're looking to do, it's like, it's just it sets the stage for empowerment because the people can move forward in the way they want to move forward. It's very interesting. You can almost see a shift when you work with an individual and they're just like, wow, Kim gets it, or Bob gets it. You know, you can just, they're like, oh, they're behind me, and there seems to be this click, and they're like, I'll try maybe what you're talking about. I'll think on that. Give me some time and some space, you know, but you might have some merit to what you're saying. It's very interesting. It's very exciting for me when that shift starts to happen and people give you a little bit of their trust and say, you know what, I'll try some of your ideas and then I'll add some of my ideas and then we'll move forward together. And it's very powerful when you move forward together towards the person's goal.
A related shift to that is what we call the MI shift, which is the shift of responsibility for change. Because historically, we've taken it on ourselves.
That's true.
When a client comes to me, it's my job to make this person different, to make them better.
Yes.
And what MI is about is taking that responsibility and putting it back where it belongs,
Right.
on the person.
Because that's
And
too tough of a job. Yeah.
It is.
I can't get everybody a
It's a
job.
load off me because it's on them now, and that's where it belongs.
Yeah,
Because it's
absolutely.
their decision to make, it's their choice.
Absolutely. And I say it's my job to help someone get a job. It's not my job to get someone a job. And at first kind of people look at you like, what is, and then they, oh, I get it. You know, and I say I don't have a drawer full of jobs. I can't hand you a job because if I did, you wouldn't own it anyway. And you wouldn't be successful at it because I don't know you well enough until we explore what we want to together. I won't know what kind of job is the best match for you. And it takes them a little while, but then they get it. And I've seen it time after time. When I first started in this field, people would say, I need a job yesterday. And I would hand them jobs and it would inevitably turn into a mess.
Yeah. But when they have the ownership of it, when they have the initiative, that's a different outcome.
It is.
Because they're more excited about it, they're more engaged with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in wrapping up, Bob, if someone is excited and they say, I want to learn more about motivational interviewing, or they have questions for you, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Well, the state email system has my address as robert.jope, J-O-P-E, at state.ma.us.
Okay.
By phone, it would be 508-996-7917.
Okay. And there are trainings people can engage in, and you would let them know.
There are a
the
good
dates of
7
those?
or 8 MI trainings over the course of the winter months up until April.
Wow, okay.
Most of those in the southeast region of the state, but others are being offered statewide.
Fantastic, fantastic. Great. Well, thank you very much, Bob. We appreciate you being on, and we look forward to hearing more about motivational interviewing.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to say thank you very much for our audience for tuning in once again to Employment for All, and we are sponsored by the Department of Mental Health. And we'd like to remind you that everyone can be successful with the right supports, and it just might be you who helps really listen to someone, demonstrate understanding, and help them think through to reach their full potential. So thank you very much. This is Kim Bissett saying have a wonderful evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.